Can start.
Yeah, can start.
Good evening, everyone. This public hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Let me first welcome the officials from the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and I invite the PS, Miss Rita Tusa, to introduce herself and her staff, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs expresses appreciation for the opportunity to contribute to the committee's inquiry into the status of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, the CSME, in Trinidad and Tobago. The CSME, which came into effect in 2006, is now an important element of the regional integration process. It was created to assist economic development of CARICOM member states through providing an enlarged economic space. It is noted that the objective of this inquiry is to evaluate the status of Trinidad and Tobago's implementation of the CSME under the regimes of the free movement of skills and labor, free movement of goods, free movement of services, free movement of capital, and the right of establishment. And it is hoped that the Ministry's responses will provide the information required. I am joined this afternoon by my far right, Ms. Sasha Griffith, Foreign Service Officer, Mr. Colin James, Foreign Service Officer, Ms. Shamyanti Lal, Foreign Service Officer. To my left, Ms. Jennifer Marchand, Director, CARICOM and Caribbean Affairs Division, Ms. Myrna Huggins, Foreign Service Officer, and Mrs. Candice Shade, also Foreign Service Officer.
Thank you very much. To introduce myself, which I am sure need no introduction, I'm Marley MacDonald, Minister of Public Administration, and on my right.
Good afternoon, Paula Gopi-Schoon, member.
Good afternoon, Maria Dillon Remy, member.
Good afternoon, Avinash Singh, member.
Good afternoon, Anita Haynes, member.
Good afternoon, Shamfa Kajol, member.
This is the committee's first public hearing pursuant to the inquiry into the status of the CSME, that is the CARICOM Single Market and Economy in Trinidad and Tobago. The committee's inquiry objective is to evaluate Trinidad and Tobago's current status with respect to the free movement of skills and labor, free movement of goods, free movement of services, free movement of capital, and the right of establishment. To all the listeners and viewers outside there, you can send your committee questions related to today's topic via email at parl101@parliament.org, facebook.com @ttparliament, on Twitter @ttparliament. We will now commence the questioning by the committee. We'll probably start with Member Paula Gopi-Schoon.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we would want to do today is to evaluate Trinidad and Tobago's status with respect to the 5 core regimes under the CSME. Without a doubt, Trinidad and Tobago has benefited with regard to the free movement of goods. And I know that it is the intention of this committee to have before us as well the Ministry of Trade and Industry and also the Ministry of National Security. So I reserve the question in with regard to the free movement of goods. and perhaps services. But what I'd like to ask is what, in the ministry's view, has been the gains made by our country with regard to the free movement of skills and labour, and also the free movement of capital and the right of establishment.
Madam Chair, through you, thank you, member, for the question. Trinidad and Tobago has gained, I think, on different levels. In terms, first of all, the opportunity of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to find greater opportunity under the CSME in terms of employment, offering services outside of Trinidad and Tobago. There's expansion of certainly the pool of labor available in Trinidad and Tobago. There is greater, I think, competition. Some may say competition is not good, but competition among members of the labor force, and it is expected that there would be perhaps a better pool from which to choose from among the increased number of persons who are available for labor. And with regard to the right of establishment, yes, free movement of capital, thank you. There is, the free movement of capital. There are gains there as well, given that there is an increased space, increased investment, generally an expansion of the opportunities open to business and to persons who are seeking to improve their lives through greater opportunity for jobs.
Ms. Toussaint, can I ask a supplemental question, so to speak? When we talk about, we are here to look at or evaluate Trinidad and Tobago's current status with respect to the free movement of skills and labor, or labor. We are talking about the freedom of persons to come into work in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course, those who leave Trinidad and Tobago to work in the other CARICOM countries. What has been the success rate of Trinidadians working in the other CARICOM countries?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not able to say how successful our nationals have been in terms of jobs that they may have been successful in obtaining. But I don't think I have a figure at this time, but I will check. There has been certainly a large number of nationals who have come into the ministry seeking the skills certificate. So there is a measure of success for our nationals.
And could you tell me, what about those other CARICOM nationals coming into Trinidad? How have they been faring to date?
Okay. They have been successful as well. When I look at reports on the extent to which other nationals from CARICOM come into Trinidad and Tobago and are also applying rather for the rights of establishment, and those who produce their certificates from their own countries, there has been a measure of success for them as well.
So, Ms. Tuse, are you saying that from where you sit as PS at the ministry, Trinidadians and Tobagonians do not have a problem with the right of movement, the freedom of movement across the CARICOM in terms of seeking work, employment, whatever, across CARICOM countries? Are there challenges, as I'm trying to get at?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know of complaints that we've received along those lines. There may have been one or two occasions when persons may have perhaps been denied entry, but in terms of persons complaining that they're not finding jobs or having difficulty or challenges along those lines, have not had those reports.
If I can ask a follow-up, what are the factors that can hinder a CARICOM national, for instance, from working in Trinidad and Tobago?
Through you, Madam Chair. If, for example, their documentation is not properly prepared, or they're missing elements of the documentation that should be provided, if they have maybe a criminal record, if they don't have a skills certificate, for example, those would be the areas I think that would prevent them from working under the CSME.
Okay, if I can fast forward a bit, there was a meeting in December. If I can fast forward, there would have been a meeting, a special meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government on the CSME in December 2018. And what was sought was really, under its call, I believe, the Satan's Declaration, that a greater commitment to take action to advance the regional integration agenda. And of course, this is to the advantage of the well-being of all of the citizens of our community. That would require Trinidad and Tobago to undertake particular policy positions, followed by legislative action, to widen the group of persons that are allowed to enter Trinidad and Tobago. Can you update this meeting on some of the positions taken to widen the group of persons that are able to enter Trinidad and Tobago and the status of it?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. With regard to the additional 4 categories to which you refer, I think, these were decided on by heads of government at the meeting in December. And I'll just mention the categories: agricultural workers, beauty service practitioners, barbers, and the security guards. There is yet to be, at the CARICOM level, an indication or decision on the requirements of the persons who would fall into this category of worker. So that is something that Trinidad and Tobago and all countries would need to have before we launch into whether it is any legislative change that may have to take place to include these categories as persons who may enter to work under the CSME. But that has not yet taken place.
So as it is, what categories of workers can come into Trinidad and Tobago or can go into each other's countries within the region?
Okay.
What are the existing categories?
Thank you. The existing categories are, and I'll start with the original 5, university graduates, media workers, musicians, sportsmen, artists. Is that 5? Yes. Those are the original 5. The expanded 5 are nurses, teachers, holders of associate degrees, household domestics, and artisans. With respect to the second 5, Trinidad and Tobago has not yet completed the legislative amendment that would allow them to come in under the law, so to speak. However, administrative arrangements are being made for them to be able to work, meaning that we will recognize the skills certificate provided by their home countries to permit them to come in and to work until such time as the legislation has been.
Regard to the second 5. Okay.
Can I? Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Your response actually leads me to my question. I'm going to your responses submitted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I noted that you said that the commitment to amend the existing legislation by stipulated timeframes, and we have not yet, so it said that we have not met the deadline, but there have been no new timeframes submitted. So I guess my first question is on the new timeframes for the amendment of the legislation. I understand the administrative provisions being put into place, but these are pending legislative amendments. So I'd like to start there, please.
Thank you for the question. Initially, the deadline was February.
Yes.
It's been extended to July this year.
Okay. And thank you. And from that, going in that same document, there was a issue on whether or not stakeholder consultations have commenced, and I note that your ministry would have sent around draft legislation. Is there any updates on those stakeholder consultations prior to these amendments being made?
Right now, the matter is before the LRC, the Legislation Review Committee.
Okay, so the matter, the legislation is before the LRC. So once it comes back to you, then you would commence stakeholder consultation or further stakeholder consultation. Am I getting that timeline correct?
I'm sorry, member. Would you repeat the question, please? Through you, Madam Chair.
No problem. So the legislation is before the LRC. Once it comes back to the ministry before it is laid in Parliament, would you foresee stakeholder consultation taking place in that gap?
Thank you for the question. That remains a matter to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The PS, we have been with the CSME since 2006. Do we have any documentation about the numbers of persons who have applied from other CARICOM countries to come here? Because you said in your first response as to how successful this is, you talked about large number of nationals applying for skills certificates. Do we have any numbers of those so far of people coming into Trinidad and Tobago? That's question one.
Thank you for the question. We have a total of, I'm just doing some math. Okay. This is the figure here. Okay. We have a figure of yes, 4,000. Let's say roughly 4,000 skill certificates have been issued by Trinidad and Tobago. Thus far, and that is since the start of the operationalization of the CSME in Trinidad and Tobago. For those who have
Just any idea of the categories based on the areas that we had, the first 5 areas? Any idea of what categories, the numbers in each category? Or is it something you'd like to provide later? You have the documentation?
I'll check, member, and see if we have them here. Do we have those figures? No. Sorry, no, we do not have the figures by category with us at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you, Madam Permanent Secretary, and it could be any one of the officers can respond through you, Madam Chair. Just for the listening and viewing population, could you identify the process or the procedures of someone coming into Trinidad and Tobago based in the CARICOM nationals, or vice versa, someone from Trinidad and Tobago going to one of our our partnering countries and being denied entry? Could you just elaborate so that the population could be aware of what's the procedures that follow? And then that would lead me to my follow-up questions. Just to identify what is the process.
Good afternoon. There is in place a procedure established at the level of CARICOM for persons, skilled nationals attempting to travel, or any CARICOM national attempting to gain entry into another CARICOM member states to lodge complaints. So if you are at the point of entry, upon denial of entry, the CARICOM complaints forms available at airports. Generally, at least in Trinidad and Tobago, is available at the airport, as well as primary ministries that come into contact with responsibility for CSME matters, which would be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, as well as the Ministry of National Security. So in Trinidad and Tobago, any person can gain a form from there. But if you, at the point of denial, the person, of course, is repatriated to their country. However, they can submit a complaint form. The form is also available online. So whether they take one from the airport or they download it online, they submit the complaint to either the CSME focal point in their own country, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that forwards the complaint. From when the complaint is submitted, the focal point who receives the complaint shares it to the relevant member state in question. So if a Trinidad and Tobago national is making the complaint in another member state, that member state will forward the complaint to Trinidad and Tobago. And then the matter is, an investigation is triggered, and it is also submitted to the CARICOM Secretariat.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the Permanent Secretary or anybody on the team who could answer, I'm a little troubled by the information being presented to us today. Because if this is a unit that deals with CSME and matters related to CSME, I am confused as to why don't we, if you don't have access, if you don't have the numbers as to how many applications we've received from other CARICOM residents over the years and how many we have submitted, we don't know the categories, who's really keeping check, who's really looking at, is this thing really moving, or is it just fancy talk among our leaders? I think we on the ground are responsible for the actual implementation, for the actual tracking to see, okay, what really is the situation on the ground. I think we need to be in a position to say so. And if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doesn't have that information, who does? Is it Ministry of National Security? Where can we find that information so that we know what the reality is on the ground? I'm a little troubled that that kind of information is not coming to the fore, and I'm hoping that you could provide some answers, please.
Madam Chair, the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs receives the applications. So we do have that information. I don't have that information with me today.
Right, because you were asked whether you will be able to provide it at a later date, and that answer didn't come, so therefore you can provide it at a later date.
Yes, certainly.
Okay, so are you able to tell us in categories as it relates to if we had lawyers, doctors, nurses, and so on, you're able to give us that kind of information in a definite figure? Do we have that information somewhere?
Yes, madam.
Right. Okay, and what about when residents of Trinidad and Tobago make applications abroad? Is there some kind of regional system so we know what is really taking place from island to island across the Caribbean countries?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
What we do have is an indication of who from Trinidad and Tobago is applying. We have the category as well, because we prepare the skill certificate for the persons who have to go abroad, using that certificate to access work or whatever the undertaking. Thank you.
Therefore, we know what the inflow and the outflow looks like.
Yes, member.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Ms. Tusa, in last December, I had a golden opportunity, along with some of my colleagues here, to attend a conference, I would call it, at Hilton, where the CARICOM leaders met. And of course, there are lots of representatives too from various CARICOM countries. And I was so impressed with that meeting. It was basically on the CSME. And if I didn't believe in the CSME before, when I sat there and I listened to the CARICOM heads, I was very, very proud. I was very proud when I listened to Ms. Mia, Prime Minister Mia Motley, and when she spoke about our size and what we can achieve and the economies of scale if we should get together, and the movement of people, the movement of goods and services and capital in the within the CARICOM area. I would have thought that, like my colleague, I expected a little bit more, probably. But probably as the investigation goes on this evening, we should hear a little bit more coming out from your ministry, which has the responsibility for this type of thing, the CSME. But having said that, my question is, as I said, we are concentrated on the movement, the free movement of people within the Caribbean. What happens? Have we been receiving complaints of ill treatment of CARICOM nationals entering Trinidad? And if we have, how do we deal with it? Because I have heard in my own private capacity about, treatment of a couple of people coming into Trinidad. So how do we deal with it? Do we have these statistics?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We do have information on denial of entry under the CSME, but that, of course, would be restricted to those persons who go through the complaints procedure that Ms. Griffith described earlier. For each member country, it is the same process. With regard to recent complaints, there were two recently. That was at the end of, at the beginning, sorry, of January. And at the end of, up to the end of 2018, I have a record of 2. But of course, it depends on if the persons are using the complaints procedure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just to go back to the question from Member Kujo, who's talking about the data and the data that you would have collected. In your submission, as well to the committee, we were speaking about some of our potential benefits and potential negatives. And there's a line in here that says that it can assist with any labor shortfalls which can be filled by CARICOM nationals. And then we speak about a decline, that it will assist in the decline in our working population, etc. And I just kind of wanted to gauge from you where what data facilitated this analysis that was presented by the ministry. This is on page 19 of your submission. The responses by Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you, Member, for the question. Through you, Madam Chairman.
Sure.
The views that have been set out here have not yet been based on a comprehensive study. But such a study will have to be conducted via the recipients of these persons who have employed them, whether it is in the private sector, via the chambers, via any other business association, via government agencies as well that may have employed persons under the CSME. But a comprehensive study has not yet been done. Thank you.
Sure.
Just, we were talking about data before, about inflows of people coming in and outflows of people going out from Trinidad and Tobago. I just think it's important that we should also have some mechanism in place to record who has been denied entry and the reasons for it, because that's the only way we would know the progress of what we are doing.
So,
in other words, I don't think it should depend on people sending in a complaint. A person could be denied and not send in a complaint. But is there any way of knowing that they've been denied from whoever does the denying of it? At such, you understand what I'm saying? If the person is denied entry, they could say, okay, well, I'm going back home, and that's not a problem. And they don't send in a complaint. But that should not be our way of finding out of what people were denied, because this is something that we need to know how it is working. And therefore, so my question, therefore, is there any way of you or any one of the ministries in Trinidad and Tobago knowing who has been denied and the reason for denial?
While you ponder on that question, Ms. Duce, Let me see if I could help my colleagues here. You know, I'm sitting here and lots going through my mind. What we want to find out, what are the figures? What progress are we making with respect to the CSME? Are we moving forward? Are we sitting down? Are we static? Are we going backward? What are we doing? If we do not know if we are making progress, then we are wasting time. If it is, you know, I've asked the question, what sort of treatment, if there's any ill treatment of CARICOM naturalists coming to Trinidad, we have no records of such. We don't record it. What about Trinidadians and Tobagonians going into CARICOM area looking for jobs? They are denied. What sort of records do we have on this issue? If we don't know, then we wouldn't know how we are progressing with the CSME. It's supposed to be, it's a single market economy. How are we doing? And we need that information, and that information is going to inform us on the policies and even legislation we will probably need down the road. But if we can't, and as I said, I listened to Ms. Mia Motley, Prime Minister Motley, in December, and I was really, really, really interested, and you got that sort of attraction to the whole idea about CSME. It's always been there, but you just heighten it more in December. So we need to get a little more information so we'll be able to deal with the issue and understand it. I know that probably the Immigration Department or the National Security will be able to give us some more figures. But the thing about it, I see Foreign Affairs as that overarching policy ministry that will deal with issues like this. I might be wrong, but this is how I see it. You wanted to ask what's that?
I think she was going to respond.
Okay, you wanted to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With regard to the member's question, while the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs would not be at the forefront of collecting refusal data, because the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs approach, because of how the arrangement has been made, is via the complaints procedure. However, there would be data on refusals of entry, and that would be via, as the chairman had mentioned, the Immigration Division of the Ministry of National Security. Of course, we can ask that ministry to share the information with us by reason for refusal. But there would be that information, I imagine, at the Ministry of National Security. Thank you.
Thank you. And given all that is said in the last few minutes, I think I'm probably among us on this side. There is some kind of expectation that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will still be the keepers of the entire CSME agenda, and therefore, even though statistics may reside elsewhere, you would, as a body that makes policy on behalf of the government with regard to the CSME, we would want to know, or if we wanted to evaluate where Trinidad and Tobago is, we would expect that to be coming from the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and I think that's the feeling here. We were, from the onset, we wanted to evaluate where Trinidad stood with regard to the movement of skills and labor, and that's why I would have said that with regard to goods, we would leave that for the Ministry of Trade and Industry. But okay then, so there are 5 categories, and for the listening public, the right of establishment, tell us what is meant by that, and can you evaluate whether Trinidad has benefited from this? I'm going to leave that with you. Perhaps you can start by explaining what is meant by the right of establishment.
By right of establishment, we are referring to the ability for CARICOM nationals to move from one member state to another for the purpose of establishing a business, providing either a good or a service. There have been a significant number of CARICOM nationals entering Trinidad and Tobago and having success in establishing businesses. However, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago nationals being able to establish businesses in other CARICOM member states, that has been to a significantly lesser extent, primarily because not all member states have implemented that particular regime to the extent that we have. The data number of Trinidad and Tobago nationals wanting to establish businesses in other CARICOM member states is not available because we've just had like cursory reports of persons expressing interest in doing so, but no solid cases of persons actually attempting to do so and having failed.
Does this go, to my mind, does this not extend fully to all Trinidad and Tobago businesses that have established branches or set up businesses in the rest of the region?
Yes, it does, but the reports that we've gotten refers primarily to smaller scale businesses in terms of the inability to do so. However, Trinidad and Tobago establishes businesses in Trinidad and Tobago have been able to conduct business in other CARICOM member states, probably through the establishment of other branches.
Is there a procedure also for if a business wishes to set up, a person wishes to set up a business, or a business in Trinidad and Tobago wishes to set up another branch or some arm of his business in a CARICOM jurisdiction? Is there a procedure?
There is a procedure, but it varies a bit from member state to member state. So I can speak to what the procedure is for nationals establishing businesses in Trinidad and Tobago, but the specific requirements of other member states for businesses being established there, I do not have that information at my disposal.
I just want to proffer that perhaps this seems to me an area where Trinidad and Tobago has benefited tremendously, that there are a number of Trinidad and Tobago businesses that are established throughout the region, and this provides many opportunities. For instance, setting up a business in Guyana where there is the opportunity of land availability and so on. So it offers opportunity for diversification. It's so wide. Do we stop to evaluate where we are? What are the opportunities on either side, Trinidad and Tobago nationals or businesses wishing to set up in the region, and vice versa? Have we evaluated at any point the success of the right of establishment?
Thank you for the question, member. Through you, Madam Chair. From consultation here, that assessment in any great detail, it seems, has not yet been done. All that we can look at this time are the successful applications that we see. Yeah. Madam Chair, if I may give a sense of some information from a previous question. Thank you. I didn't realize that we had the data here with us. Okay. With regard to the number of nationals who have sought, CARICOM nationals who have sought entry, and this is data that we have for the year 2018. The total allowed entry, and this data is from the Ministry of National Security. The total allowed entry is 120,055. There's also data related to the purpose of the desire to enter Trinidad and Tobago. And I can give you a sense of some of the reasons, if this would be useful. Yes? There is incentive vacation. Sorry?
Do you have it by categories?
We have, sorry about that. Yes, it's a document that I can perhaps...
Well, then let's circulate it.
Circulate? Yes,
yeah,
certainly.
Thereafter.
Okay. Certainly.
But I would ask you a question. This CSME, I understand it to be an arrangement among CARICOM countries to create this single market space with the removal of all restrictions, which, and this is on your document, which would result in the freedom of movement for persons, skills, labor, freedom of movement of goods, free movement of services, capital, and the right of establishment. Tell me something, Madam PS. In order for us to achieve this full implementation, what are some of the challenges we are facing? Because it is obvious this has been going on and on and on. For years, we are talking CSME. So what are the challenges? These are the 5 things that we all agree on, CARICOM countries you want to achieve. This is what we want to achieve, a single economic space. So what are the challenges that are facing us at this point in time that we cannot, and what could we do to move forward?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. One of the challenges of getting the CSME and specifically the freer, I would refer to it, movement of persons and full implementation would be, I think, legislative challenges, getting all of the countries completing their legislative procedures in perhaps a more timely fashion. We too have been dealing with our own legislative matter with regard to the second 5 categories. So that, I think, would be one of the major issues for
so you believe that legislation, our legislative agenda, needs to be addressed in order to achieve this, what I've just spoken about?
Yes, Madam Chair. For example, if we use the second 5 categories, which we have approached thus far by administrative arrangements, it can only go so far. Once there is the legislation in place, these 5 categories or permitting these 5 categories would be given force of law. So it would then not be an issue of persons having to retrace steps or anything like that. Legislation is in place and the persons can come in, and it makes the flow a lot easier. It makes it legal.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, through you, I just want to come outside of the line of questioning we have posed so far into asking for a comment on a statement I am about to make. In terms of security guards, where we have taken note that we have nothing in place yet to accommodate CARICOM nationals seeking that form of employment in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm just speaking now on experiences I've exposed to on a lot of public spaces, some private entities as well, where security guards, in my interaction with them, because they are the entrance of public spaces and private spaces, it's clear to me that they may not be Trinidadian nationals. Would you mind, Madam PS, giving a comment on the arrangement for security guards being employed? And most of them, to my understanding, may very well be non-nationals. Am I clear to understand that some of these employers are not in keeping with the standards, the arrangements in place? Because if we take note that we are not in a position to accommodate them yet, then most of these existing, arrangements. Would you mind commenting on that?
Thank you, Member, for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, it would be very difficult for me to comment on that because I am not aware of what process someone may have employed personnel. And I just know that under the CSME, arrangements are just not yet in place. So I couldn't say whether people are legal or illegal. Thank you.
Madam Chair, which leads me to the next question. I was just trying to get the answer to whether persons may have been coming into the country under the existing categories of skills or labor or goods or services, and then finding themselves outside of the categories they may have come into, and whether we at the Ministry of CARICOM and Foreign Affairs have any way in tracking these persons, or is it maybe left to immigration perhaps to track? So you have no role after you all have given someone entry via the CSME work permits and so on. We have no way in tracking these persons?
Thank you for the question. In the process, there is thank you, Member. I was just consulting. It is difficult to trace that, because if someone comes in under university graduate, let's use the first one, it does not restrict that person to any one field, unless I'm mistaken. It does not. Where someone comes in under the category of media worker, for example, at the point of entrance into Trinidad and Tobago, the person does not indicate, I am going to work with Media House X. So it's a difficult thing to track. It is possible that something could be put in place to track them, but at this time it is very difficult.
Madam Chair, through you, I would strongly recommend, just like in the Ministry of Education, where we have scholars that go out, study, and come back, we have a process of tracking these individuals. Madam Chair, I would strongly recommend that if it is the Ministry of CARICOM and Foreign Affairs that would be issuing work permits and so on, that we put something in place to at least track these persons who are holders of CSME permits and so on, so that, at least we would have an idea. Because at the end of the day, resources have to be made available, whether it be health, whether it be whatever forms or fashion. And to the countries, whether it be Trinidad and Tobago or any CARICOM nation, at least we would be able to measure our successes and failures from the process of CSME, whether it be persons, goods, and services. So I would strongly recommend that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
As our chairman noted at the beginning of our proceedings, the hearing is carried live, and members of the public were invited to send in questions if they had, and we did receive we have received one question from a member of the public, and she wanted to know what the time frame to review an application form for this skills certificate. What's that time frame like?
Thank you, member, for the question. 6 weeks. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Toos, 6 weeks, she said. Ms. Tousa, given the importance of CSME to the CARICOM area and the efforts that are being made to bring this thing to full implementation, what has the ministry done in terms of sensitizing the public, educating the public about the importance of CSME, not only for CARE, because we don't, once we get the thing right, then we can now go out to different countries, we can now work, we can now move goods and services, capital across. What have we done to sensitize Trinidadians and Tobagonians about the importance of CSME?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the years, at various points, the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs has gone out into communities. We have gone to the tertiary level institutions. We have participated in the Public Service Week, for example, job fairs, to let people know. With limited resources at this time, we have to use a different approach. We have to use technology more effectively. But that aside, there is consideration to resuming that approach, perhaps more vigorously, given CARICOM heads' eagerness to advance the CSME and its implementation. And I have an example of more recent. Last year, for example, we have had outreach at the Cipriani Labor College, and one high school as well that I have on the list. Thank you. I don't want to call the name of the school, but we've been doing that type of outreach. But I recognize that there are still perhaps pockets of Trinidad and Tobago that may not be reached. So we have to devise a mechanism that is manageable to be able to reach those persons. Thank you.
Well, the little effort you have been making, would you say that you have been successful, Ms. Tusa?
I'm not sure what, if success means that people from those outreach exercises have been the ones who have been coming in to apply for certificates. So I couldn't say how successful along those lines, but I understand that the interest level has been high. It would be useful, I expect, to perhaps go back to those institutions to see what actions people may have taken. Of course, the interest has to be there to pursue it on the part of
So are you saying that you do not have any mechanism, you didn't put any mechanism in place to measure the output of what you're doing? If you're going to do, or you have a little strategy, you want to sensitize the public about CSME, there must be some form, some methodology that you'll put in place in order to see how successful you are.
There is no mechanism that we've put in place to capture information that would tell us which of the persons we've reached out to have in fact applied or taken up the opportunity to pursue a certificate, a skill certificate, for example. However, I understand that institutions have made repeat requests for presentations on the CSME, and while it's not scientific, it is a gauge that there is interest, and more people have been trying to get the information on it.
Do you have a desk at the ministry if someone should come in and they want to find out more about the CSME? Do you have a dedicated little unit for the CSME?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a dedicated unit.
There is?
Yes. It's within the CARICOM and Caribbean Affairs Division of the ministry.
And it's working well? How much staff do you have there?
Oh.
Is it a full office, or is it just a desk and a chair?
There are 6 persons in the unit.
Dedicated to the CSME?
Yes, Madam Chair.
You want to tell us what the unit does? These 6 people?
I will start, and if there's anything I've left out, if I may, I will ask my colleague.
Sure.
But
any one of you could answer, you know. It doesn't have to be you alone, Ms. Tusa. You have a team.
Okay, I will ask Ms. Griffith to assist.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a team, it's a staff of 6 persons. The primary responsibility of the unit is processing applications, skill certificate applications, as well as right of establishment applications. The unit also provides information to the public, whether it is persons calling in, sending in emails, or visiting. The CSME unit also does the public awareness aspect of the CS, where institutions, organizations request lectures or having a booth set up to provide information on the CSME and means for access. The unit also represents Trinidad and Tobago at the regional level in terms of the officials meeting that is convened periodically on the CSME to assess the free movement of skills, as well as providing input into meetings of the various organs with regard to CSME matters, whether it be the Council for Trade or the Council for Human and Social Development or the heads.
Madam Chair, through you, just want to revert back to one of the statements made by Madam Permanent Secretary earlier in terms of some of the factors that hinder the CARICOM nationals from entering, in terms of the criminal offense being one of the factors. But I saw it's specific in terms of it depends on the nature of the criminal offense. Madam PS, do you have any further explanation in terms of what type of offenses that are referred to? Anyone from the legal department can assist you?
Okay, sorry. Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. I understand that it's the offences that require custodial sentences of over 1 year and above, but I don't have a list of what those may be.
And just a follow-up to that, when someone is seeking to enter, is it that your ministry or is it that you all liaise with the Ministry of National Security in ascertaining whether or not the person seeking entry has a criminal record or not?
We go through the National Security, no? Yes, thank you. We go through the Ministry of National Security and they provide a report. They do their due diligence and we receive a report. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Singh asked a question earlier about persons entering and then perhaps seeking employment in other areas. And the response was that if you apply as a media worker, you don't have to state where you're going to work, etc. So my question is, I know we've already established that there's been no overall study done, and that you would give us data in terms of the numbers of persons applying for skills certificates in particular areas. But this goes back to the initial concern about tracking our numbers, is that when you're applying for a skills certificate, and you apply in an area, but if we don't have the data telling us that there's either that particular field is saturated, are we then leading to a possibility of persons coming in here and not finding a job, being unemployed because you just can't find a job in that area, and we aren't, tracking the numbers in a kind of data-driven way?
That is indeed the case. It may be important to note that the CSME provides for persons to move among member states to seek work. There is no provision that the individual or person wishing to move must have an intended place of work or must secure a job prior to exercising the right of movement. So while we do ask intended place of work on the application form, and some persons do submit that information, in many cases, there is none. So because the person is moving with the intention of seeking work. It is indeed a possibility that certain fields are saturated and people may not be able to find employment there. I think that should be at the basis of a labor market study conducted at the national level. It is also important to note that while there was a review of the CSME conducted by a consultant, I think it's a couple years ago, that review focused on the extent to which member states have implemented certain measures or the various decisions that have been taken with regard to the CSME. It did not look at the impact of the CSME, how a person's moving, and whether they are in fact finding work or the level of work they're finding, whether it is with coherent with their skill or if they are being unemployed. So that is another area in which I guess as a region we may need to look at engaging in a study of the impact of the CSME to ascertain even the flows which member states are net receivers or net senders of persons within the regional arrangement.
Ms. Griffith, I'm very concerned over that last statement you proffered there. You spoke about getting, in other words, and hiring a consultant to examine, what did you say? The work of the CSME?
I said a consultant was hired by...
no, but you're saying that perhaps that we should... You said there was a consultant hired a couple years ago, but you're now stating, put on the table...
that perhaps we should engage in a study.
Yes.
Of
Why?
this...
Why we want to engage in that study?
In a study of the impact of the CSME?
Yeah.
So that, but some of the same questions that we are being asked to answer would be answered.
But it's years we're into this. Years we are, you know, we have mature politicians, we have professional staff. I want to believe our PSs and our heads of department, they are all professionals. You don't have that confidence in that cadre of persons to analyze and evaluate the impact that the CSME would have on...
Sorry, Chair. Just to clarify, my remark wasn't that we hire a consultant to conduct the study. My statement was that a consultant was hired for a review of the CSME, but I was noting that that review did not take into consideration or examine the impact. And I was proffering that as a region or even as a nation, we may want to conduct an impact assessment given the number of years that free movement has been in place.
You're saying it different, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing. But I don't, and why I'm concerned is because I think that sometimes we need to back a bit, analyze where we are. We spend a lot of money on paying consultants, millions and millions of dollars. We get all these fancy books and we put them up on a shelf. And somebody will come dust it off next 2, 3, 10 years. we take out little pieces and we go on again. I think that we have the mettle that we can do it. I think that in the CSME, from where I sit, and my little understanding, from where I sit, I think that once we put our minds together as a Caribbean people, we should be able to get this thing done. Did you go to that conference in December at the Hilton with Prime Minister Mia Mottley? Did you, Ms. Griffith? Did you attend it?
No, I was not in attendance.
Okay. Ms. Tusa, did you?
Yes, Madam Chair, I attended.
And your views, and I'm sure you're very much impressed the way I was. Weren't you? Don't answer.
I'd like to.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
As we're talking about that December meeting, and I think anybody who attended or who looked on or noted what was said in the press would have been excited, because in that meeting, all states, and Dr. Rowley, our own Prime Minister, was one of those who really pushed to have this meeting. And so I think Prime Minister Motley would probably be lead head for the CSME area, if I'm not mistaken. But at the end of the day, all states committed to the integration movement as a whole, but reaffirmed their commitment to making sure that this single market does in fact work. And that's the same, I think all of the decisions came out in the St. Anne's Declaration. For the public, could you tell us what were the key commitments which came out in that St. Anne's Declaration by all member states?
Thank you, Member. Through you, Madam Chair. The most well-known, I think, commitment is the 4 additional categories that they committed to. That is agricultural workers, beauty service practitioners, barbers, and security guards, as I mentioned before. They committed to, or recommitted to, the recognition of skills certificates from other countries, from other member states. There was a commitment for legislative and other arrangements being put in place, and there were some time frames given as well for that. There was also a commitment to finalizing the regime that permits citizens and companies to participate in public procurement processes, and that by the end of 2019. The mutual recognition of companies, those are some that were committed to. And Madam Chair, if I may respond to your question. Thank you. I have had the opportunity to be part of CARICOM meetings, sittings, various, many of them. In December, I was very encouraged to see not just, it was not mere talk, there was obvious eagerness to advance the CSME. And as a technical person, basically, it is good to see that the energies that the ministries of foreign affairs around the region and other ministries, ministries of trade, etc., pour into the technical side of things, that there was a new push at that level. And it gave me the feeling that there would be some considerable advancement based on the commitment demonstrated by heads at that meeting. Thank you.
Let me just reestablish this. Was there a commitment to have full free movement within 3 years, if I remember? Was there something like that?
I'm sorry. There was towards full free movement within 3 years. That's right, yes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Permanent Secretary, what I'm hearing from the chair was that there was a lot of excitement from at that last meeting and the recommitment of CARICOM leaders to this CSME, and now the, let's say, completion of the whole thing in 3 years. In order for that to happen in Trinidad, what do we have to do? We talked about some of the challenges and stuff before, but what is there, okay, let me ask, what has happened within the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs after that meeting that indicated that there was a new excitement about this thing happening? What has happened since that meeting in December?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may refer to just one, which is a significant one. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs has been involved in the process for bringing the second 5 categories of person on stream legislatively. We have participated in the consultations of the Legislation Review Committee. And while those consultations have not yet completed, we have been actively involved in that regard. We have also been involved in the consultations for the CARICOM Multilateral Air Services Agreement, for which there would be benefit for Trinidad and Tobago's airline. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Those are 2 of the areas that we've been involved in. So it's not been a static, we've had the meeting and then things just stopped. There has been involvement in the activity to advance it. Thank you.
To ask one further question, would you say within your ministry there's enthusiasm for this process?
Thank you. Yes, I would. One of the things that, and perhaps this is personalizing it, but I will say it anyway. One of the things that would happen when you're a civil servant, especially in a ministry like the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, a lot of work goes into advancing a policy or a commitment made by a head of government. And sometimes you work very hard to get things accomplished, but you never see the end of it. Given the commitment and recommitment by heads last December, there is a real chance that we can see the end of it, meaning that Trinidad and Tobago has accomplished what we've set out to. We are very committed as a country, and certainly government is, in terms of the integration movement. So for my ministry, seeing this advance, it would be a very good accomplishment for the country, and we would be happy to see that we've had a part in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toussaint. Members, are there any questions? Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Toussaint. We are going to close off at this point, but I want to reserve the right to have you come back here, because we will be continuing this topic with a different ministry. So I want to reserve the right to ask you, Foreign Affairs, to return at a later date. Ms. Toussaint, do you have any closing remarks, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually very happy for the opportunity to be part of this process. As because it gave me the chance to look again at the ministry's approach, and some of the questions that were raised here today were considered. It gives us a chance to perhaps shift our approach to dealing with the CSME. Sometimes when you are very engrossed in an exercise, you miss certain things, and there's obviously more that the ministry can look at in terms of delivering information and collecting information, even if we are not the first-hand receivers of that information. So certainly for that, I am appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me thank my team, also the Parliament staff, the media, the viewing and listening audience. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.